my background is Canadian. I'm from Toronto originally, and I ended up in Sweden by accident, which is probably a story that's familiar to many people who've come from other places and ended up in Sweden. I was in Patagonia on a boat in the middle of nowhere and met my future husband there, Magnus.
So
So
cool.
I took a wrong turn and ended up here, which is generally a very good thing. And there are a lot of similarities between Canada and Sweden, so I don't feel so much like a fish out of water. So I've been here for almost 20 years, and in that time, had the fortunate opportunity to work with many of my passions, which you mentioned a few. Photography, design. I've worked with architecture, and most recently started a career within contemporary art. So my greatest passion is to find ways of combining all of these and to create spaces that make people feel well and that can build individual sustainability and resilience. And that's what the company that I co-founded with my partner Sarah Bankson is all about, creating spaces that promote resilience and help people find ways of reducing stress in their everyday. In those spaces we are creating both for schools and within companies, and healthcare, and optimally we will be also creating them within public spaces. So that's the ambition.
This is
Um,
a really exciting area to be in, and it's you guys are innovators in this space, I'm imagining, and it's such a relevant thing as we disconnect with nature. Just it gets this disconnection gets stronger and stronger and more profound and more profound. Um, we would love to hear, before we get into more about your take on building resilience through connection with nature and art, what is your, just to help us all, what is your understanding of biophilia? Because when this theme came up, I was definitely, I had definitely had to research and get a proper definition of the meaning. So I would love if you would help us as a bigger group to understand biophilia.
sure. I mean, essentially, in its simplest form, biophilia is the idea that we feel comfortable in nature because we evolved there.
Mhm.
And since we've spent 99.9% of our evolution living in nature, that's not surprising that we have this physiological connection to nature. And I think more and more there are studies supporting, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, um, how it impacts us both physically and neurologically. But I think there's some interesting social and anthropological connections as well, in the sense that nature is a way of reminding us how important community is as a
Mhm.
means of, historically speaking, that's been how we've survived and been able to evolve as long as we have, has been this community, that nature has a way of sort of sharpening our cognitive abilities and giving us hope and helping us build empathy, which has then led to our survival because we've realized our dependency on nature is essential, and also um, our dependency on each other, which is also kind of linked into why COVID has for some people become an interesting turning point where they've maybe not given so much thought or reflection onto what their needs are in terms of identifying with nature or living close to nature or spending time in nature. And for many people, that connection has started to come back, which is a positive thing that has come out of this epidemic. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. These are like really, really interesting angles on our connection with nature and biophilia. And for many of us who even appreciate being in nature, maybe at the weekend we know we need to get out into the forest or go for a walk or be beside the river. This these ideas or these concepts that you're talking to us about, like how nature reminds us of our connection with community, or how it sharpens our cognitive ability, this I think can be a bit of a leap for many of us to like see the actual connection. Because I think personally, I did, before this topic came up, before really speaking to you and, and hearing your insights, I didn't properly understand this really deep connection that we have as humans with nature, rather than not just that, oh, it's nice to be in the forest, oh, don't I feel refreshed when I go camping, or I love to sit out the back garden and, you know, drink tea in the morning. What is it? Why does nature have these effects on us?
Well, I think, as you said, many people are not conscious of it. It's just like that we feel this connection, but we don't know why. And I often refer to that sense of, packing the car and heading north on the weekend, which we always did growing up in Canada. And you leave the city behind you and you feel this sense of anticipation and joy about heading north, but you don't know why. And there's actually a lot of theories suggesting that this is something on a cellular level, that our bodies long to get back into nature because we're spending less and less time in nature. And there's a lot of theories surrounding what some people are calling urban amnesia, which is the less time we spend in nature, the less ability we have to understand and recognize our need to be in nature, so that our cells are, maybe starting to forget that need and remind us that it's time to spend time in nature. Statistically speaking, children today are spending half the time in nature that their parents did. And that departure will just continue as generations go on. So, this pivoting away from nature is something that's a bit scary, because we know that the less time we spend in nature, the more likely we are to suffer from depression and stress related disorders. So, this connection is not just, thank God it's Friday, I love going up north for the weekend. It's actually your body and mind's telling you that this is what I need. And this is an interesting part of biophilia, is that nature is giving us what we need in order to replenish the resources that we're depleting in our everyday through work and relationships and the stresses that we encounter. So without that connection and understanding to sort of replenish these resources and equalize the balance within us, we don't feel well. And people are starting to understand that more and more. But I think it's a slow process, because I think we've, post-industrialization, we started thinking about, us and nature as some kind of polarization, as opposed to we are nature. So it's not a case of looking at, how we can harness nature or colonize nature or benefit from nature. We're doing that to ourselves. So that's an interesting perspective as well, just on how we've positioned ourselves in the last couple hundred years due to industrialization, sort of over nature.
Absolutely, it's so fascinating, and I think it's a very exciting time that there are studies coming out which support this connection we have with nature. So it's not only that we understand that when we get into nature, it means that perhaps we don't have our phones. So the benefit is the absence of the distraction. The benefit is actually, from what you're telling us, is this actually cellular connection with being in nature and us as part of nature. I recently read a book about sleep, and I found it really interesting to see how it gave me a deeper understanding of how we are connected with nature in a very factual way, transcending that kind of idea that, oh, connecting with nature is very woo-woo, or if you believe these things, it's something faith-based rather than being fact-based. And it's so exciting to me that studies are coming out, but this experiment was, they put some guys into a cave where there was no daylight, and their bodies still went in line with circadian rhythms. They still were connected to nature, and this has been, studied to, or the conclusion was that this is a connection on a cellular level. This is our internal clock, connecting us to what is happening in the world around us, in the natural world around us. And so this is really, really inspiring. I love that there are studies coming out to support this. And so I'm guessing this was part of your story when you started Artwell. Was this part of, I know there are very many elements to Artwell and what you guys create in your spaces, but was this part of what inspired you, or what was your core inspiration for Artwell?
Yeah, the starting point really was when I've been working as an art consultant. I had several instances, but particularly one that I'm thinking of, where I installed a piece of art at a private client's, and when I met her subsequent to that, she said on several occasions, God, this work, it just creates this amazing energy in our space. It's just this balance in our family. It's just, our room is so much more harmonious. And I thought, these are things that when you live with art and work with art on a daily basis, it's something that I just take for granted. But of course, I know the positive benefits surrounding yourself by art. But this connection top of mind for many people. And I think it's interesting to know that when we choose how we live and somehow impact the spaces that we're also working in, if we have that possibility to make them somewhat how we feel like we can work efficiently and be focused at work. And we put a lot of time into our working day, and we put a lot of time into our homes, but I think we don't necessarily always make conscious choices that have the possibility to make those spaces as beneficial as possible for us. So that anecdote about the art consultation was just that, this was an eye-opener for that client. And I think many people have the same experience when they actually think about what am I consuming in my home that actually can either contribute positively to the energy there or not. And if you make a conscious choice, and many people need help with that, about what you're going to live with surrounding you, you actually have the possibility to positively impact your space and your sense of well-being daily, every day, both at home and for some people in their workspaces. So especially now with COVID, that's more important than ever. So we started, so how can we make sure that people who want to make those conscious decisions and have a need for this replenishment and being restored throughout the day, how can we make that accessible to them? What ingredients could that include, and how could we help them with creating these spaces? So the spaces that we create are a combination of art and light, sound, tactility, and all of those elements together contribute to spaces where people can take a micropause that gives them sort of like a reboot in a short period of time, gives them the tools they need to reduce stress and then proceed with their day with a better energy and cognitive focus.
This is so relevant, as we mentioned, but what do you think we can learn from this year in regards to like nature deficiency disorder, this sense of disconnecting with nature, and like bringing this into our spaces? From maybe it's happening already, you would be the best indicator of that to tell us, is this happening already, that we are now understanding in a more factual, strategic way, rather than just in a, oh, isn't it nice to have plants in the office? Are we integrating this connection with nature and is that going to grow, do you foresee? Or are we still is it still too early for us to kind of get our brains around how actually changing our spaces in these ways is not just about having a creative interior design concept, it's actually really about making these incredible impacts on our well-being, our cognitive ability, our performance, our happiness?
I think that COVID, as I mentioned briefly, has been a good awakening for many people who've consciously or unconsciously found themselves drawn back into nature. And that's been a function for a lot of people, just for practical reasons, have been working from home as part of social distancing. but that's meant that they've had more time to walk their dog, or more time to linger at the mailbox and talk to their neighbor, or more time to pick up their kids at school and pass through a park to get there. So I think that has been something that people have experienced as a positive aspect of these past months. If there could be a silver lining, that could be it. And then I think that, if we look to international, there's so much research being done both here and abroad. If we look at a few examples of things like, forest walks and bathing in the cypress forest in Japan, and studies there about how that is immune boosting and even potentially helping us generate more NK cells, which are the cells that fight cancer. Studies that have come out of Vancouver in Canada about the benefits of urban forests. And I think urban forestry and urban planning is something that is there's so many great ideas and innovations happening within cities. And I think that probably needs to accelerate. But there are a lot of people with great ideas and inspiration coming to urban spaces with new ideas about how to incorporate nature in our everyday when we are living in urban centers. Because people who are living in urban areas have a much higher likelihood to suffer from depression and stress and anxiety disorders. So we know that, and there is a response to that. And then also looking at examples within healthcare. And there have been a lot of studies about how people who are experiencing imagery of nature as opposed to just looking at blank walls or out a window at something industrial are actually able to recover more quickly, and in some cases with less medication. So I think, at least in Sweden, but I think this is a global thing, people want to see the evidence, and the evidence is there and getting built on all the time, so that we're understanding that this is not a case of interior design. It's a case of evidence-based, researched environments and what elements that they can contain in order to be a recipe for well-being and building resilience. And I think more than ever with COVID, people have really suffered from a sense of feeling a loss of their communities because they have not been able to maybe be in their workspace with their colleagues. And we're responding to that by sort of getting out in nature and understanding the healing benefits, and also that community is what we need to survive. So we need to find innovative ways of reproducing that. If we're not, for instance, in our spaces of work, then we need to find that in nature or in other constellations, so that we are given the resilience to continue to evolve and survive as our ancestors did. And that has to do with finding ways to restore our cognitive abilities, to feel empathy for others, and to have hope for ourselves and our planet.
Exactly. Kirsten, did you find that there are any examples of, say, bigger offices or companies who were embracing some of these strategies or implementing these creative ways of designing spaces already pre-COVID, or have you observed any? We are in Sweden. I think before coming here, I had these ideas or misconceptions, or not sure of how there is just this greater awareness of connection with nature. Like I see even little kids, they go on little walks, during their school day. Do you think that we do have a greater connection with nature here, and have you seen that imprinted onto any workspaces or bigger public spaces here?
Yeah, I think there are lots of great examples of that. And I think, in Sweden, nature is somewhat of a religion for a lot of people, as it is in Canada. So I can recognize that here. I think that biophilia within corporate environments often gets distilled down to, we put plants in offices and that makes people feel better, and that's enough. So one thing that I think is a little bit frustrating is that people tend to do have a gesture or make an initiative that is a good start, but it's not enough. And of course, it is good to introduce growth and plants into office spaces. That's fantastic. But the idea that, just connecting back to what we discussed earlier, that uh, individual sustainability is where we need to be in order for us to positively impact our workspaces, our families, our communities, and the world at large. We need to be sustainable as individuals, and the green spaces and the plants in offices help people feel well, yes, but there's more to it, and that has to be looked at in a greater context of, okay, how can we have more initiatives, because I think a lot of companies do the bare minimum, and often it's a case of educating them and inspiring them to do more. Because if people are working without taking breaks for 8 hours straight, or don't have time to go to the toilet, or don't have time to get outside and see the sky because they're so busy, then that's not a sustainable work environment. So it doesn't matter how many plants you put in the office, you're not going to compensate for the lack of the other ingredients that people need in order to feel well. So I think the plants are a symbol of something good, but they're not enough. We need to make more of a commitment to make sure that people are getting what they need. And part of that is time for cognitive restoration on a regular basis. So you shouldn't feel scrutinized by your boss because you take a break. You should be applauded because you're doing what you need. And that's another connection to biophilia, is that it gives us what we need. And we are the ones who know what we need in order to find that equilibrium and replenish those resources that are depleted. So it's, I think, good just to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, you make some really interesting points about how this really does come down to our individual sustainability, and these ideas of what it is to work hard are just based on flawed beginnings. I was also reading a book about how the grueling schedules that new doctors work under in hospitals, it's actually based on the type of schedule that the original doctor who created it was actually taking amphetamines. So it's based on something which is not linked to our own human abilities, and this has now become a standard. And so all these standards are in place of what it is to work hard. It is to not take breaks. It's to eat your lunch at your desk. It's to just like get down, grit down, or biohack yourself, like remove your need to be in touch with the sky or nature. And it's so unfortunate that this has kind of become a reality. And if you choose something different, it can often be that you become a certain type of person, and you are like the woo-woo one in the office. You're like the crazy one who needs to get out and be in nature. And I suppose with Artwell, creating these spaces enable people to just land where they need to be, and for it not to be such a fight to get the basics of what we are cellularly drawn to.
And there's so many stigmas, like just back to corporates, there's so many stigmas surrounding mental well-being, and we're not thinking preventatively. We're letting people hit the wall, and then we're putting band-aids on to make sure that they can get back to work as quickly as possible, instead of saying, okay, we know globally, the World Health Organization has said that by 2030, depression is going to be the single greatest health concern. And that was before COVID came. So I'm wondering whether maybe we've preempted that and we're already there. But when depression is the biggest global health concern, then pushing these attitudes that we reward these behaviors, which are totally not sustainable. Some of the biggest companies in the world who are expressing their sustainable positioning in terms of their corporate branding, it's like there's nothing sustainable behind that, because they're treating their employees in a way that is so unsustainable, and asking them to manage a lifestyle and a workload that is not sustainable. So there is a disconnect there that I think, this preventative health attitude needs to really get more space in these dialogues, because we can't afford in Sweden, society can't afford to keep putting the band-aids on. We need to stop reacting and think preventatively in the first place, and trust that if we have positive initiatives that help people on a daily basis take care of their own health, then society isn't going to have this burden of trying to take care of all of these long-term sick leaves, and the curve in mental unwellness is just shot up, and it's affecting more and more young people as well. So it's a crisis in the unfolding at the moment.
I am excited, Kirsten, that you are a voice in this space to help us to understand these things, that these changes that we need, and how it needs to be a preventative um, strategy that we take in our own lives to stand up for what we know we need, and then on a corporate level, and also on a governmental level. And I would love to know, before we get to our community's questions, what is your ambition for Artwell, and where can we find out more about you, and what do you envisage Artwell becoming and transforming and developing into?
Well, the ambition for Artwell is really to, continue to educate and to raise consciousness of the importance of restoration and how it connects to us as individuals becoming sustainable. So that's sort of the vision. On a practical level, we just need to create spaces for restoration in as many places as possible. And some people struggle a little bit with the concept, because they're wondering, okay, what does this space mean? What, I don't understand. We don't have the square meters. Or there's a lot of reasons why people can say, oh, we have a room. That's a good excuse that we hear. We have a room. Well, what does it look like, and how is it designated, and what's inside? And because a company has a room, which is by law what they have to have, they can cross that off their list and say, we're doing what we need to do, because we have a space that potentially somebody who does not feel well can lie down. And that tends not to be used.
For everyone joining, sorry to interrupt you, for everyone joining who's not from Sweden, what is this room that you're speaking of?
It's by law, the Arbetsmiljö, the work environment law stipulates that companies of over 50 people have to have a resting room on the premises for somebody who doesn't feel well to be able to rest in. And so companies tend to have that, but due to the fact that either where it's located, or the fact that it's filled with packing boxes, or the fact that it's a completely hostile environment, or the fact that it's locked and nobody has access to it, there are lots of reasons, and stigma and leadership in companies. They're not used very frequently. So when we ask people, where do you get this time to just gather your thoughts, sink your shoulders, exhale, and sort of regroup for your next meeting or your next presentation, that we often get the response, more than anything else, that people do that in the toilet, because they don't have a space for that in their office, which is just so inhuman. Yeah, don't get me started on that. It's just an awful situation. So companies have it too easy in terms of what criteria they need to fulfill, in my opinion, about what sort of space they need to give people for cognitive restoration, because they're not by law really forced to do that. So you have to find companies, which anybody who is working for a company, or who knows of a company, or a space that would really need an Artwell restorative space, please shout out, because it's something that, we need pioneers and ambassadors, and people who know that this is an important part of their individual sustainability, to be demanding it, so we can sort of together collectively take responsibility for our well-being, and make sure that it can be as small as a corner or as big as a room that several people can access. So there's a lot of flexibility in what the room can be, But the important thing is that these spaces can pop up both within companies, but within schools as well, and within public spaces. We know that since stress and anxiety disorders are affecting more and more children, that giving kids the tools to both recognize that they're in a stressful situation and have a space to remove themselves to in order to sort of get back up on their feet in the school day is extremely important. And schools generally don't have something like that. So
again, it comes down to the toilets, probably.
And then in schools, the problem is that the toilets are so awful that a lot of kids don't even want to go to the toilet. So then they develop incontinence issues. No, seriously, this is the reality. So they don't have the option to go into a corporate toilet where it's actually peaceful and maybe, smells okay. And it's like an okay experience. They go into like often a really nasty toilet, which is not where you want to spend time to gather your thoughts and reboot. So it's a dilemma.
So many problems with the very, very fundamental basics. Yeah. Kirsten, I want to get and allow to everyone to give their or pose their questions to you. So I'm just going to jump into the Miro board. We have some questions for you, and one of them is, do you have any idea of a country that applied biophilia principles in their urbanism strategy? In terms of,
I think, well, I referenced the urban forests in Canada, in Vancouver. I think that's a good example of a city that is really trying to make nature more accessible and recognizing the positive benefits of immersing ourselves in nature, and that also we need to sort of counteract urbanism by introducing more green spaces. And I think a lot of cities are working in great ways with introducing more green spaces or doing facades of living greenery or little installations around cities that are sort of reminding people of natural elements which are somehow disconnected from the urban area, but to give those little indicators and reminders. So I don't have any other specific references, but I think there are lots of initiatives, and there's a great sort of urban planning international community that I have full faith in. I think it's a case of in some countries and cities, it's easier to spontaneously get projects up and running, which is what needs to happen. If they're too overthought, it takes a lot of time, and then there's too much red tape and bureaucracy. It's tricky, but
another question is, how can we recreate instant restorative space at home, in the car, wherever? Any tips or tools that you could recommend from your experience, Kirsten?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we know is that immersing yourselves in nature, of course, since you're engaging all of your five senses, that's one of the only opportunities we engage all of our five senses. That is fantastic. When you don't have that opportunity, I think the sense of smell and aromatherapy can be very key, and something that's practical and easy to apply in any spaces. And I recommend looking into, there's lots of different ways of bringing that into your home or your car, but finding, different scents are connected to different moods and energy levels, and finding scents that you feel is, again, replenishing what you feel is depleted. If you need energy, then certain scents are good for that. If you need relaxation, then certain scents are good for that. So I think that's quite practical. I also think I'm a firm believer in soundscapes. We work with soundscapes in our spaces. And I think that having maybe not, there are lots of generic soundscapes that have references to nature, but also some that are less generic and more composed with the purpose of giving people a sense of sort of reconnection with hints of nature, but also just in general to bring us down and affect our heart rate and our stress levels I think is also something that you can play at home or in your car, practical.
They're really good points. And actually, this is part of why our little question at the start was a scent to bring the link in with the biophilia topic. But I think sometimes we forget about all of our senses and we just think visual. So Kirsten has given us some incredible tips there, but guys at home, think about being a little bit more tactile, and then we find these other solutions we never thought of, which are very easy to implement. We can all change the fragrance in our room, we can all change the sound.
And I think even that tactility we work a lot with as well, and just on a basic level, like I look out my window and happen to be so fortunate to live surrounded by trees. So that's, my fantastic reality today. But, when I'm not here, I just find things like objects that give you that tactility, stones, small pieces of wood, things that you both can feel in your body, but also in your mind, that connection. And, sometimes I pick up stones when I've been on a beach and just keep them, and I can have those just to hold in the palm of my hand and to feel it gets a sense of calm just to feel something. So that's also another tip that is not to be underestimated. We have small things that we can do that are flexible and inexpensive and good ways. Just the ritual and taking the time is part of it, right? So it's not just about an object or a piece of art or what you're listening to. It's the fact that you designate the time and the space, the mental space and the physical space for restoration. And I think the ritual is a big part of it because you're committing to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. Those are really empowering tools. And guys, I want to challenge us all now to do something as simple as taking a piece of wood in our hands, taking a stone, and to just disconnect with any idea that this is woo-woo or crazy. There are studies to back up how our cells are craving this connection with nature and how it can be on such a small yet practical way that Kirsten has recommended to us. You can also share your picture and tag us on Instagram, tag Kirsten. We've got your connect there in the previous emails, but we'll share them again. We are coming very close to the end of our talk, and thank you so much, Kirsten. I'm just wholly inspired.
Thank you. So nice to be here. I feel like we could just keep going forever. There's so many.
That's exactly it. And if we could get everybody's questions, my apologies to everyone whose question we didn't get a chance to come to. If you get onto that Miro board, you'll find Kirsten's LinkedIn. Please connect with her there and share your questions with her there. Get her on Instagram. We have connected to Kirsten in the previous emails, but I'll share her connections again. I want to very quickly ask us all to get ready for a team picture. We're just going to take a big screenshot. And while you are preparing yourself, you can grab something from the house, which means festivity, means Christmas to you. We've got our Christmas jumpers on. If there's anything close by to you that means Christmas, grab it, get ready for our team shot. A reminder, guys, that on the Miro board, we have our community board. So a lot of people have added in some incredible announcements there. My apologies that we don't get a chance to read them just now, but please go in. The Miro board will be live after our talk ends, and we will share those details again this time we'll do it on the homepage so everyone can see. I'm just seeing one there. We got a sale for Christmas postcards. You can get in there. Someone is looking for a front-end developer. Somebody else recommended Brené Brown's podcast, Dare to Lead. So there's a huge variety of stuff and a great reflection of what's going on in our community. So back to our team picture, guys, of the Creative Mornings team. Oh, look, right, we've got some candles. We got a Christmas decoration. Someone has a poinsettia tree. I'm going to grab some antlers, which are not going to show up because I got a background on. I've got a Christmas mug. We're missing a few people from the get your screens off, but we'll just generate all the Christmas and festive energy in your place. We'll do it for you guys. We've got some cool Creative Morning stickers. So when you're ready, guys, let's do some cheeses. Cheese. Happy Christmas. Yay. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you to everybody who joined.